In last week's webinar, we discussed execution. I made a little soundbite on it today and posted it on Twitter. So we had the 4 principles of good execution. We had sit on your hands when you don't believe an opportunity is high probability. And as I said before, I don't think taking high probability trades is that hard. The hard part is trying not to act like a fucking idiot in between them. Number 2, step up when you believe it's time to do so. Okay, no fear, no hesitation. You've got to just follow your process and expect nothing. We spoke about that last week in some detail. Expectation creates emotion, and you just don't want emotion affecting your trading. Number 3, trade the market, not your P&L. And number 4, try to learn something. So you want to look back on the week that was and learn from the trades you took and the way that you executed them, and we'll speak more about that tonight. I want to pick on a few people randomly. I said I would, and I fully intend to. So let's see who we've got in here. Does anybody want to go in the firing line? Adrian, I see you sitting there. Okay, so I've got a question for you, Adrian. Did you sit on your hands this week when there was nothing that you thought was a high probability opportunity? Were you able to do that? Kinda. What does kinda mean? Did you end up taking a shit trade and saying afterwards you wish you hadn't? Okay, so after sitting on your hands for 2 days, you then convinced yourself you saw something. You got into a trade and it wasn't part of your plan? Plan was bullish cable, took a short. Am I reading that right? So you sat there for 2 days and you didn't trade, and then your plan was to buy cable, but you actually took a short. Oh, you've got to get out, mate. You've got to go. I'm sorry, but you've got to get out. That's inexcusable. Alright, he's done. I've kicked him out. He's going to be all over Twitter now calling me a right cunt. That's an inexcusable mistake. That is inexcusable. Sit there for 2 days and then go the exact opposite way to your bias. Fucking hell. That is proper amateur hour. Right, who else have we got in here? Who else wants to get in the firing line? Miguel. My question for you, Miguel. When you thought it was the right time to do so, did you step up? No fear, no hesitation, you just followed your process. So basically, I want you to tell me whether you second-guessed yourself at any point or whether you executed cleanly all week. So Miguel says, I haven't taken a trade in 2 weeks because the bias I look for hasn't presented itself. Lol. I see that dubious little lol on the end of that. You haven't taken a trade in 2 weeks? What are you, a fucking hedge fund? Mate. I would have thought you need to trade a little bit more often than that, but you can stay in the webinar because I did say, did you step up? And your answer was, I haven't seen anything. So, okay, fair enough. I'm going to give you that. I'm going to give you that. You only trade one bias. You haven't seen it for a couple of weeks. Okay, I mean, only you know whether you can trade like that and make a living. Okay? I think most people are going to struggle if they're not finding a trade in a fortnight. But again, I don't know how you trade. I mean, maybe you're trading the Decade Open or something. Right, okay. Who's next? Saeed. Look at Saeed lurking there. Did you trade the market this week, Saeed? Or did you do a bit of P&L trading as well? Truthful answers, please. Lurking like a dirty perv. I see you. Nothing gets by me. Okay, you traded the market, not your P&L. I wouldn't have expected anything less of you, Saeed, but I have to check. Mike, I've got a question for you. What did you learn this week? Tell me one thing you learned. Always got to be seeking improvement. Give me one thing that you learned this week. So I'm talking to Mike M, but Mike S says I trade using an algo, so the execution's taken care of. That's fine. We're grilling Mike M at the moment, who's gone quiet. I researched my 3 trade setups that I missed, went back further on winners that should have worked, that I've not held properly. Okay, good. So you made an effort to learn something. Okay, that's fantastic. So we've picked on 4 people, only one has basically had to be thrown out. That's good. Now, yesterday I tweeted about how the work doesn't stop for me at the weekends. Saturdays I review the week that was. Sundays I plan for the week ahead. And someone said to me, fucking hell, when do you get time off if you're working weekends? And my answer is that I'm not literally working all weekend, but I like to take the reviewing and planning process across 2 days, because by doing my review of the week that's gone on a Saturday morning, which is when I always do it, events are really fresh in my mind, and then I can kind of draw a line under them, and then I can come back Sunday evening and make my plan for the week, which just involves me looking at the calendar, looking at the markets. Are there any biases? Are there any key levels? Do I need to be watching the open closely, especially if we're opening near to a very good area or you've got a very firm bias? So again, review on Saturday, plan on Sunday is how I do things. In terms of the weekly review, I want to just give you some pointers of how I do things. First off, I like to make sure that all my trades are logged. And of course, I've taken the screenshots of them that I need. And I use Edgewonk to record my trades. I thought everybody knew that by now, but clearly they don't, because I always get asked what do you use to record. And it is Edgewonk. Now, I tell you all the time about journaling. But the other day, I saw someone tweet, well, I take loads of trades. I haven't got time to journal. Then I would say get a journal that automatically imports your trades, and then you can just play around with different filters, like, you know, what happens on different days of the week, what happens on different markets, and so on and so forth. When I was in prop, the most consistent trader there was a young man who almost never had a down day. He was a FTSE trader, incredibly gifted scalper. He traded 1 minute chart, but he used hourly and daily for bias. And I don't want to get too much into how he traded, although I can tell you that he mainly used support and resistance. He did watch the order book a lot, and he watched the DAX for correlation, but he was only executing in the FTSE. And again, insanely consistent. And I wanted to just bring him up because he did take a lot of trades, and he's very, very active. And at the time that I was sitting with him, I was posting a lot on forums, and one day someone asked me for advice, and they asked me the question you get so much, you know, what is one piece of advice you'd give to a new trader? And I was sitting there thinking, oh, this is interesting. I don't know. What is the one piece of advice I would give? And I was searching, you know, through my mind, thinking of all the mistakes I'd made and the things I wished I'd done. And I spoke to this guy, and I said to him, well, if someone asked you that question, what would you say? And his answer, I'm literally reading this off the notebook that I wrote it down in, was this. What I do is simple, but everyone wants the end result without the hard work required to get there. You have to write down every single trade you do, every single one. If you trade in and out all day long on a 1 minute chart, then that's a lot of work after hours when the market's closed, but every single trade needs to be recorded. Then keep the ones that work and do the opposite of the ones that don't. Literally what he said to me. And it's advice that is fantastic. And obviously I know that people that are trading in and out on a 1 minute chart are going to get to the end of the day, and they are going to have a lot more trades than someone that perhaps executes on an hourly or a 4 hourly or a daily. But you just got to do the work. I know I've told you guys the story before of the time that I left the prop firm, and I got nearly all the way home. I forgot my keys. all the way fucking back to the office, go into the office. The whole office is pretty much in darkness, and there's one little light glowing at the end of the floor. And lo and behold, it's the trader that made the most amount of money on the day. He'd absolutely fucking cleaned up. And he was there on his own when everyone else had gone home, and he was logging his trades. And that was the lesson in and of itself. So yes, it's very important to journal. Now, as you log your trades and you get more data on your performance, you'll start to discover things, and those are going to be ideas that you can work on. Improvement is all about asking yourself questions. When I reflect on the week that was, I'm always doing this. I'm asking myself questions. So, what worked this week? What didn't work this week? Sometimes it can be something as simple as finding that you're getting to your desk too late and it's not working for you because it's not giving you enough time to plan your trades properly. Again, I go back to someone I knew in prop. The exact same thing happened to them. They always got to their desk just before the open. They didn't have a lot of time to make a trade plan. The market starts flying around. They jump in. And they're actually a good trader, but there was a pattern that almost every single day their first 1 or 2 trades was a loser. And it was simply because they just weren't giving themselves enough time before getting in. So again, what worked this week, what didn't? Was there any type of trade that worked particularly well? Was there something you did that you might want to explore? Perhaps you saw an opportunity and took a slightly more aggressive entry than you normally would, and maybe you caught a move you normally miss, and maybe that gives you food for thought. I can't speak for everyone, I can only speak for myself, but understanding the things that happened to me this week I don't think really benefits you, because everyone's on their own individual journey. But again, you're asking yourself these questions. So again, as you look through your week, were you taking profits too early this week? Obviously very common. Were your stops too tight? That's something that's really key to explore. How was your management on the trades you took this week? Was it too conservative? Did you let lots of winners turn into losers? Or was it too aggressive? Were you always getting taken out just before trades actually take off in your favour? I think that for as long as I've been on Twitter, I've been repeating over and over like a fucking broken record that you should always take a look at what happens if you don't manage your trades. So if you're the type of trader that gets in and says, this is where I think the market's going to go, and this is where I think I'm wrong, so I've got to stop and target, what happens if you just don't manage your trades? Now, I'm not saying just suddenly do that going forward, but I'm saying, actually compare, log somewhere the outcome so you can see with black and white evidence, this is what happens when I manage, this is what happens when I don't manage. I told you the story of the fader that I knew, how he noticed that one of the guys that he was fading had a really good read, but every time that guy managed the trade, it all went wrong. He'd grab a tiny profit when it stalled, he'd move stops up really quickly. Sometimes he actually went to target, and then at the last minute he'd change his target and make it bigger. His read was good, his execution was awful. So it's something to think about, obviously, in the quest for improvement. Another big one that I find with students, did you have good ideas but you didn't pull the trigger? Very, very common problem. I was speaking to someone the other day and he said that sometimes a trade will turn just before his level and he doesn't want to pay up or down to get in because it feels like poor discipline. So let's say he wants to buy the market at a level and it's coming down into it and it just turns, it starts to move away and he's basically sitting there with his dick in his hand. Probably quite literally as well. So he doesn't want to get in because he feels like he's chasing it, right? And the thing is, and I think this is very, very important, is that sometimes the things that you're told not to do that are, quote unquote, bad, aren't necessarily bad. In my opinion, if you're going for a 4R trade, for example, and it turns ahead of your level and it starts to bounce and you feel, that you might miss the fill, but you can get in late and still take 3R, then it probably pays to take that trade. Now, I can't say that for sure because I don't know the balance between probability and payoff in your own edge. But the point I'm making here is I think many traders probably get too rigid, all in the name of keeping to the rules. I must keep to the rules. As a new trader, you've got to have rules. You've got to have a framework. You've got to have the discipline to keep to those rules. But over time, you need to understand that there are situations where it will pay you to bend the rules, and your job is to work out when those situations are. So if something like this happens to you and you do end up, paying up, getting into the market, journal it. You got into the trade late. What happened? What happens to these trades when you usually get in late? Do you find out that most of the time it actually comes back and you should have been more patient and you could have got the perfect entry? Or is it actually a good thing to do? If it turns before the level, you need to get in. Only you can answer that. Another question I think people could benefit from are their distractions you need to cut out in your trading. I wanted to quickly address the question of multiple markets. A lot of people ask me, should I just focus on one market or trade a handful, or even more? Some people say trading multiple markets is distracting, there's too much to look at, I can't cope, and other people argue that if you trade more markets you get more opportunities. It's again very much down to the individual. It's not only how you trade but what you feel comfortable doing. So I swing trade multiple markets, including the FX majors. I trade gold, I trade the fucking ES, I trade Bitcoin. I mean the list goes on, but I've got just one market for short-term trading, which is the Bund, the German 10-year. When I originally asked the same question of the traders around me in prop, the biggest guys there, they all did things differently. And that was one of the annoying things that I found. You can never pin someone down to a fucking straight answer, because the next guy, who's also a ledge, says the exact opposite. And I remember asking one guy and he said, look, I only focus on one market and I want to trade that market every day and I want to know it inside out and back to front. I want to live and breathe that market, and that's how I managed to crush it. I spoke to another guy and he goes, no, I trade multiple markets, and I don't know how you limit yourself to one market. And this guy, I don't know how many he traded, but at least 3 that he traded actively. So again, it's one of those questions that you just can't pin down to, profitable traders do this. Profitable traders trade one market. Profitable traders trade multiple. It doesn't work that way. But the one thing I would say is I look at multiple markets, but my focus is usually on 1 or 2. And the other markets just sit there in my peripheral vision. From the markets I look at, there is almost always at least one where there's a trade that's going to set up here today, and it's a very high probability trade, and this is where I want to focus. This is where the action's going to be. And I think that's important to be able to do. I don't want to get into too much about how I trade, but as I said before, I'm always looking for biases, and anyone that knows my material will know that the bias is really key for me. I've literally just pulled up Bitcoin because I know so many of you guys are trading crypto now. But this is a classic bias for me. So we've got the swing failure pattern. It was a break below this low, it was a close above. It's suggestive of a reversal. But importantly enough, the day that this SFP occurs is a Monday. And the market has a high probability of returning to test the Monday open price once Monday has closed. And it usually happens on a Tuesday. And you can test that for yourself. It doesn't take long to do. So now you've got a couple of things that are forming the bias there. You've got a downtrend, you've got an SFP, high probability it's going back to tag the Monday open. So I'll come in there and I'll say, okay, look, this is what I need to be in today. I don't give 2 shits about the fucking DAX or gold or whatever it might be, because they've got levels but they're a long way away from price. They're not likely to be hit today. Here's my bias. This is what I need to execute on. Actually, when you look at Bitcoin here, there was an hourly SFP, so you can take the low and you'll see that we actually get the hourly SFP here, and it comes in the evening. And obviously that was your best entry with hindsight, but it was fairly logical to presume at the time that that was going to be a good entry. So this is actually a pretty good example of what I mean when I say taking an entry as close as possible to where you're wrong. Whenever I tweet that, people get so confused and they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? It makes no sense. It's really, really straightforward. If you see an SFP and you think, well, this is likely to be the extreme, it makes sense to enter on the close of the SFP. There's a lot of people that will see something like this and it'll go fucking vertical. And then they're like, oh, it looks bullish now, I think I'll buy it. And actually, when you look at the reason they're buying it, because they think this is the low, look how far away they are from the source of their reasoning. Another thing you can do, which is very helpful when you're reviewing the week, study the biggest move of the week across the markets you trade and see if you can see anything that could have caused you to catch it. That's always a really good thing to do. You can look back, and obviously you've got your rose-tinted spectacles on, but you can look at that. Sometimes you see some interesting stuff and you think, actually, there was something I could have potentially done there. How did I not see that at the time? Or actually there's something that I don't do, but I've noticed this before, and maybe I can start doing it. I think it's very important to review missed opportunities and the result on your P&L. Just to play devil's advocate for a second, I would add that missed trades, again, like trading outside your plan, sounds really negative, but it can be a positive thing, because sometimes, you can find I'm getting to my desk every morning at 8, and if I review the missed trades, I always miss 2 trades from 7 till 8, and they would always be losers. So I've learned that actually missing that morning hour is a really good thing, and I've learned a lesson on to make sure that I never actually trade that hour. So missing sounds negative, it's not necessarily so, but you want to be thinking, what am I missing? Am I missing a really good opportunity somewhere, or actually am I doing the right thing and missing stuff that I don't need to be in anyway? This whole process of asking yourself questions is absolutely critical. It's literally how you become unstoppable. If something isn't working, there's only one way to make sure that it does work. You've got to take it completely apart and often rebuild it piece by piece. And only by doing that can you make sure that every single aspect of your trading is really working in the most effective way, and that you as a trader are performing at your optimum level. And again, that is done through questions. One of my favourite questions is the one that I originally saw posted by Lance Beggs. So if you don't follow Lance Beggs on Twitter, you should. It's at Lance Beggs, LanceBeggs. And he's very good at getting you to look at yourself and challenge what you do and examine yourself in light of best practices. But he has this question, which I think is so good. I think everyone should try and answer this. And the question is, imagine you're the head of your own prop trading firm and you need to interview new traders and they don't have a track record. So you've got these guys coming in the door, you don't know anything about how they trade. Write down what the top 5 qualities that you want to see in those traders. So what are the top 5 things you want to see in a trader in the interview if you can't see their track record? And then grade yourself on those 5 qualities. Give yourself a score out of 10. And the question becomes, would you hire yourself? If the answer is yes, great. But many people would say, fuck no, there's no way I'd hire myself. But here's the key part. They know why. They know why they wouldn't hire themselves. They'll immediately say, there's no fucking way I'd hire myself. Geez, no. I take way too much risk and take these really stupid trades. Well, then those are the qualities that you need to work on. So sometimes thinking about the problem in a slightly different way can be really useful. I think it's a very good idea when you're looking at things to improve to literally try and break down your entire trading experience. We break down you as a trader and we say, would you hire yourself? But you can also ask yourself how well you know your plan, for example. I used to get traders that I taught and I would fire questions at them and they wouldn't be able to answer them. How many of you now can answer all of these questions? Number 1, what is your setup? So basically, do you know what you want to see? Do you know where you want to see it? And do you know when you want to see it? So if you can define me your setup, what about if it comes along at 6 o'clock in the evening? It's right there, it's beautiful, but it's 6 in the evening. You taking that trade or not? Do you know the answer to that? Do you always know where to place your stop? Or are you faffing around? I don't know where to put it. If I put it here, I can get a 4R, but actually that looks a bit tight, so maybe I should move it back here. What's your process for placing your stop? Number 3, do you know where to target on these trades? Number 4, how confident are you in your setup? Number 5, what would cause you to stand aside from your setup? Next question, is there a circumstance under which you would add to a trade? How do you add? What's your process for adding? So again, if you can't answer these questions, then you probably shouldn't really be trading. I know I can't stop anyone trading, but I wonder if being unable to answer these questions might be at the root cause of why some people hesitate. I'm surprised how many people can't answer questions about risk. If I fire questions at you and say, how much risk per trade? How much risk per day? What happens if you hit your daily stop? you stopping out for the day? What are you doing when you stop out? Are you turning the monitors off? Are you going to paper trade for the rest of the day? Are you going to sit there and fucking watch porn? What are you doing? What's happening in a good period? Are you scaling up risk? Are you getting aggressive? That's what good traders should do. What's happening in a bad period? And do you have a plan? Because once you've got a plan, you can adjust it. You can go, look, this isn't working very well, or this is, Going back to the trader I was speaking about earlier, and I jotted his points down in a notebook where he said, keep things that work and do the opposite, or eliminate things that don't work. That's what you should always be trying to do. Everyone's got a weak part of their plan somewhere. Maybe the weak part of your plan is you've got terrible fucking trade management. Maybe the weak part of your plan is you've got terrible money management. You're constantly betting too small, or you're getting so cocky and betting too big. But you've got to find out your weak point and improve on it. And those are the points I wanted to cover tonight. But there are so many things that you can look at, and that's the process of doing the weekly review. I do a weekly review, I do a monthly review, I do a quarterly review. I mean, I'm constantly trying to get better. And like I say, Edgewonk throws up a lot of things. So you can filter your trades and say, how do I do on days of the week? How do I do in certain markets or whatever? But what you really want to be able to do is sometimes answer questions that the journal doesn't cover for you. And that's when you learn the most. Gary, when you say, are some people not able to become a trader, can anyone become successful? I think anyone can become a successful trader, but most won't. The one piece of advice I would give is basically stop fucking messing around. You can't afford to make mistakes time and time again, the same mistake. I took 7 years to become profitable. Who the fuck wants to wait 7 years? Right? 7 fucking years. That's a long, long time. But I'll tell you exactly why it took me 7 years. It's because I kept doing the same thing, like over and over again. Oh yeah, well, I blew an account using no stop. Let me just try that again and see if this time I get a different result. That's everything I wanted to go over tonight. I don't know if Adrian's tweeted anything. Has he tweeted anything? I'm not on Twitter at the moment. I'm not looking at it. I don't want to get distracted. But he's probably called me a cunt. Has he called me a cunt? I like Adrian. He's a good man. He's a good man. Oh, I feel bad now. But the thing is, that's how we're going to do it going forwards, Ledges. I'll pick on 4 people every week. Got to hold you accountable, Ledges. Right? That's what it's about. I think execution is behind most people having issues. Obviously, you've got to have a fairly decent strategy. Look, you can be a master at executing some dog shit strategy, you're not going to make money. But I think there's so many different ways to make money, and most of the strategies people present me with look good, but they just keep going back to, I can't do this, I can't do that, if only I'd taken this, if only I'd taken that, if only I hadn't fucking gone balls deep, if only I'd not been a pussy and bet larger, and so on and so forth. And all these issues seem to be with executing the strategy. And I've always taught my strategy, but maybe now I'm going to put myself out there and say, I don't give a fuck how you trade. I don't care if you trade a moving average crossover or you trade this strategy, that strategy. I'm not here to judge it, but I want to make sure you're executing it well. And if you execute it well, then you can get to the solution a lot quicker of whether it's a good strategy in the first place. If you execute it very effectively and you're still not making money, it's probably a shit strategy. Right, Ledges, I'll see some of you next week, some of you on Twitter, and have a good one. I'm going to go and watch the highlights of the game. Don't tell me the score. I'm out of here before anyone does. See you later.